So we are here at the Kettering First Robotics Center, the first of its kind in the world. As you can see here within the field, we have a full field setup. We have 8 teams that we support here, 8 high school teams here at Kettering University. And as you can see, we also have, where am I seeing? I am. We have the banners for all the games and stuff. And here we are lucky today to have Dr. Woodie Flowers, who, as a founder of FIRST, a professor emeritus of MIT, and really the person who came up with gracious professionalism and much more, to talk about his life, his career, how he sees things going, and what impact it's had on his life, and to impart some wisdom to us. So, for that, now I will turn it over to Woodie.
It's a big request, guys. Hi, guys.
Hello.
This is the test. I just want to see if you can hear me. So, it's good to be with you, sort of. Long way away. You're hearing a conversation from an old professor, so that means that it's inevitable that you'll get some advice. But I recognize that advice is not necessarily cherished. Margaret and I enjoyed reading Daniel Gilbert's book, Stumbling on Happiness. And the book is essentially about the title. He argues that we humans are so into ourselves that we think when someone else is in a situation and can offer us advice, we're all so unique that it'll be different for us. So we don't accept advice. So I recognize that I'll say a bunch of stuff and some of it'll just run off your back like water off a duck's back, but maybe some part of it will stick. I also want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is the phenomenon where people look at the situation they're in and say, you know, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm an imposter. I shouldn't have gotten into this school or this first team or whatever. And it's generally regarded as not a healthy thing, but I think it's served me pretty well, because I've had imposter syndrome my whole life for good reason, because I've always been surrounded by people that are better prepared and more capable than me. And what that's meant to me is that I needed to bust my chops and work hard to make it happen. So if you have imposter syndrome, make sure that it is your friend and not your enemy. So I grew up in a small town in Louisiana, a town called Gina. Gina, about 2,000 people, right in the middle of the state. And Gina was a very poor town. A lot of racism and bigotry there. And Gina has been in the news in the 21st century, in fact, because of the Gina 6 and protests and race riots. And during that time, a few years ago, the high school that I attended was burned down. So I'm glad to live in Weston, Massachusetts now. But I was really lucky, because despite the fact that our family was literally dirt poor and both parents were alcoholics, the 4 of us had a lot of love in the family, and things worked really well. Spent a lot of time together. I worked for my father in his welding and general repair shop. And somehow my parents helped my sister and I avoid some of the feelings that a lot of people had about division and lack of diversity. So I'm really proud of that. So I'll repeat over and over, I was very lucky. Now my sister was the valedictorian of everything she was ever in, including her college class. And she was an all-state basketball player, so I was the little brother that had a lot to live up to, and I think that was probably helpful too. In high school in particular, I was kind of a weird dude, because I was an odd mix. I was a Boy Scout. I was very proud to become an Eagle Scout before I was 14. Became an Order of the Arrow members at about the same time. I collected butterflies and won some science fair competitions with projects associated with the impact of environment on Lepidoptera. Would be really a relevant topic right now. Things like the monarchs are really being devastated by our environmental degradation. I played a little bit of football. I dated one of the cheerleaders. I built a hot rod roadster, and I wanted to have a Corvette. And that the hot rod roadster, I sort of had to build because I didn't have a way to date. You know, in a small town in Louisiana, if you don't have a car, you can't ask anybody out. And our family had two 1947 Dodge Power Wagons. And if you Google 1947 Dodge Power Wagon, you'll see they're a pretty chunky vehicle. And one of those my father had given me when I was 11, and the local sheriff would let me drive it anywhere as long as I didn't get on paved road, and I could get most places in the area around Gina without getting on paved road. And so I learned to drive a 4-forward on the floor crash box with 4-wheel drive, and that made, when later in life when I took race driving courses, I was quite at home with the complex shifting and stuff because it started early. So I was very lucky. And one of the ways that luck manifests itself is I survived being a teenager. I had lots of interesting things happen to me, but one of the really horrible one was that I was in the back seat of a car. There were 5 of us going from one town to another at night, and there had been a knife fight in another town, and there was a police chase, and a car that was a bigger, heavier car than we were in, topped a hill doing over 100 and head-on hit us. And a couple of friends in the car I was in were killed. I listened to the person on top of me die. I couldn't see anything. I was lucky because I broke a whole bunch of things to absorb the crash. You know, I broke lots of bones, and my face was, both jawbones were broken, and most of my nose was torn off, and I couldn't see, but I heard the friend on top of me die, and that was made a big impact. But at the time, they thought I was the least injured, so we ran out of ambulances because people in the other cars were killed and badly injured, and another drunk driver slid into the back of a police cruiser at the scene. So it was a typical Southern Gothic, god-awful scene. But that taught me about having an opportunity and maybe taking advantage of it. And some of those things, one of the curious bits of mechanics, by the way, about that was that I was in the back seat and I flew forward and hit the dash and flew back and landed in the back seat. And that snap was really aggressive because the blood in my aortic column was heavy enough to bulge the aortic arch. So I blew out my aorta, but it barely held, ballooned, but didn't blow out. And thank goodness they didn't find it in a small town in Louisiana because they would have killed me trying to fix it. So after I was a student at MIT, a sharp-eyed radiologist took a chest x-ray for TB screening and said, "You look like you're 75 years old. Something's happening here." So anyway, I have a Dacron aorta that was repaired because of a nice series of events. So that sort of thing. And when I was in the 2nd grade, I fell out of a tree and busted up my elbow. And the local physician, I think, was probably drunk when he, quote, set my arm, because it will not go any further than that. So that crooked left arm got me a draft deferment because the draft didn't want me, and got me a college scholarship. So I was surprised. I had planned to graduate from high school, get a job in the oil field, and buy a Corvette. And I gave up on that because everybody said college opportunity you can't turn down. So college career was interesting, and our first year at Northwestern State in Louisiana, I had to take trig and algebra in college because I had to catch up to lots of stuff. It wasn't until I got to Louisiana Tech that I took calculus. And I was in a summer program at the University of Texas in a research program. And then after graduating from Louisiana Tech with a degree in mechanical engineering, I came to MIT and got a master's degree, an engineer's degree, and a PhD in mechanical engineering in a 6-year period. So I was a college student for a long time. Now, I was very lucky because I met Margaret at Louisiana Tech, and my summary there is always marry over your head. And I was clever enough to, just before she gave up on me, ask her to marry me, and so that worked out really well. And the thing that you will notice is that the reason you get married is very different than the reason you stay together. And you stay together at 10 years for a different set of reasons than 20 years, 30 years, etc. And we just had our 50th anniversary earlier this year, and we've worked at it. You know, there have been times when we were seeing a marriage counselor twice a week, struggling, but when we were both up to our eyeballs in our careers and really flat stressed out, but we got through that stuff. And now, tomorrow morning, alarm will go off at 4, and we'll spend time drinking coffee in bed together, learning things together, and reading the news, and maybe getting depressed about the news. So I arrived in Harvard Square in 1966, right in the middle of Vietnam protests, the hippie movement, all that stuff. And I was like a deer in the headlights because I'd come from a small town in Louisiana to this place where everything weird was happening. And I was very lucky because my experience at MIT and in Cambridge, Massachusetts, taught me you're stupid if you judge people from by the way they look. You have to wait and listen and learn who you're listening to. I had office mates as graduate students that were just amazing people, but they were like an onion you'd peel, and you'd find out more about them the more you got to know them. And one of the things that was really important about being at MIT for me, and I offer you the advice, surround yourself with the most active, interesting, thoughtful people you can. Don't dare be the sharpest knife in the drawer or the smartest person in the room. Make sure you're always trying to keep up with the crowd. And, you know, coming to MIT, we met a whole bunch of really amazing people, and I've had some just incredible students over the years. You know, the last couple of days, because of some important visitors coming to town, I have introduced them to several former students. And it's really amazing to watch the trails, the comets trails that students have done. You know, one of my former students is Ellie Sachs. And Ellie is a member of the National Academy of Engineering now. And he is one of the founders of Desktop Metals. He's the inventor of 3D printing. He has fundamental patents on new ways to do solar cells, et cetera, et cetera. Another one of my former students is Megan Smith. You know, Megan is one kick-ass woman. She's just amazing. I just 2 weeks ago went to the National Academy when she was inducted into the Academy. She was Chief Technology Officer of the United States. She was Vice President of Google. So because I was surrounded by people who were busy and doing interesting things, you know, being at MIT led me to meet Dean. Dean is a really interesting person. Margaret and I have several hundred scuba dives where we've sailed. We recently were on an airplane coming back home, and we did a rough count. We've been to over 50 countries. We're nature photographers. So get involved with people who are interested in the world and do something new every year. Make sure you learn something new every year. I used to, when I interviewed graduate students for doctoral positions, that meant you were going to get to know somebody. You were going to be with them for several years. You're going to work together. So that the interview was a serious thing. You really wanted to pick the right person. So one of the things that I would do, I had in my office a whole bunch of weird things, strange devices. And I would ask the interviewee a question, and during their answer, I would pick up one of these odd things and hand it to them. And if she put it down and continued to answer, that wasn't necessarily a good sign. But if she stopped mid-sentence and says, "What the hell is this? Is this foam stainless steel? This is not right? There's something weird about it. That was a really good sign because I had found someone who was curious and was paying attention. So learn to be aware. You know, the other thing that was so amazing was when I was teaching 270, the precursor to FIRST, 200 really bright students, and I would have things, you know, they got a kit of material, and in class I would say, okay, now draw your motor without looking at the kit. And there was this incredible correlation. The students who could draw the motor accurately, make the shaft the right length, put the contacts in the right place, do the right shape, were the ones that could use it in their head when they were designing. The people who hadn't looked at it didn't know what was going on. So be aware, pay attention. Anyway, my minor as a doctoral student was art, so I got to know some really amazing people like Otto Pina and the people at the Advanced Visual Studies at MIT, and through that ended up, Margaret and I made 2 replicas of the Moholy-Nagy sculpture in 1970 and delivered one of them to the Biennale in Venice in 1970. And that was another kind of deer in the headlights experience. You know, there was 2 kids from Louisiana in the middle of this arts festival in Venice with all the really incredibly wonderfully unusual people that brought with it. So more eye-opening stuff. I ride unicycles. I'm a rollerblader. I was a runner for 35 years, and it's frustrating that I can't run now because I've got an arrhythmia, not a dangerous arrhythmia, but an arrhythmia in my heart that makes that really not work very well. But we have been renovating a Victorian house for a very long time. And I'm a pretty good carpenter, pretty good electrician, pretty good plumber. We own a front loader and a backhoe. I have a 40-foot boom lift, 11,000-pound machine, the best tool I've ever owned. What kind of boom lift do you have, Alyssa? A little one, a big one? None. So I really enjoyed not teaching, but helping people learn. And that served me well. I got tenure. I didn't think there was any chance I'd get tenure. In fact, when I accepted the job, the department head said, "Welcome to the department, Woody, but I guess you should know since you're in design, there's almost no chance you'll get tenure." And I did my thing, and MIT was kind and let that happen. And for a little while, I'm told, I've never checked it, but I was the youngest member of the National Academy of Engineering. So that was true until Dean was admitted the year after I was admitted. He was really young. But I had some wonderful research projects. I'd worked on computer-controlled artificial legs. My doctoral thesis was to build a prosthesis that one could wear and we could control to be whatever prosthesis you wanted to study. So it was essentially a robot that you wore on your leg, and that meant that it was powerful. Had one of the valves that was in the thruster control of the Saturn V as part of the electrohydraulic control system. So it was pretty state-of-the-art thing. And in that case, you know, you learn when you're doing things, try to get the best and do the best. Don't mess around and just get it done. Do it really well. And it was a struggle to get that stuff done because I had to beg for some parts and things, but it was a good experience. And after I met Dean in about 1990, and I invited him to come give a talk in my graduate product design class. And Dean and I ended up ranting about the same stuff, and he said, "Come up and meet my people at DECA." And I went up and showed me the SEE center that he'd put together, and he was frustrated that students were not coming there to see it. So I said, I was hosting Scientific American Frontiers at the time, which, by the way, is another do things that make you nervous. Make friends with a knot in your stomach. Doing television's hard for me, but working with Scientific American Frontiers was a fantastic learning experience. It involved some amazing stuff, you know, being shooting video, trying to stay reasonable looking in the hot sun by the pyramids in Egypt, or the hardest work I think I've ever done in my life was doing television in Moscow. Just an amazing struggle. Everything was difficult. Getting food was really complicated. You could trade cigarettes to get things like a taxi ride easier than you could use any kind of money. So bite off more than you can chew as often as you can. Recognize that people that tell you to follow your dream, yeah, follow your dream, but also recognize that you're probably going to spend a lot of time slogging along. It's not going to be fun all the time, even if you are following your passion. But even if you're not following your passion, do it right. And get out and see the world. By show of hands, how many of you have left the United States at least once? So all of you who did not raise your hand, make sure you do that, because the planet is a big place and there are lots of different people and cultures. Take advantage of learning from them. So that's enough monologue. Let's do a little Q&A. Is that okay?
Okay, we have questions, okay? Your name, what team you were on if you were on a team, what you're doing now, and you'll have to step up here closer, and I'll actually get you on video because every person in first will see this eventually.
Wonderful.
Okay?
All right, where's the microphone?
It's in the camera.
It's in the camera?
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want to sit down?
Nah, I'll
Okay.
I'll take a knee right here.
Here, I could have moved it
All right,
up.
perfect.
There.
Hello,
Yeah.
my name is Jack Greiner. I graduated from Team 910, the Fully Freeze. The question that I have is, you talked about working towards a passion and that sometimes it gets hard. Do you have any specific advice for what happens when the passion that you're pursuing becomes a chore or becomes difficult? You start to sort of lose sight of what got you into it originally?
Okay. It depends upon how deep the passion is. It's dangerous to disagree with Steve Jobs, but I disagree with his famous graduation speech at Stanford where he said all you have to do is follow your passion. The woman that wrote Eat, Pray, Love also gave many talks about just follow your passion. I think it's not that simple, and I think it misleads people to say that, because most people don't have a passion. There have been times in my career, not long ago, I was walking down the hall at MIT on a Sunday morning. I'm emeritus now. I still have an office there, but I have no regular responsibilities at MIT. So I have some freedom while I'm there. But I was walking down the hall on Sunday morning and was just overwhelmed with this feeling of remembering how many times I'd done that, and thought, if I get to my office and work really hard for half a day, I can take off time and spend a little time with Margaret before Monday morning starts, and I'm jumping right back into it. Now, you have to endure those quite a lot. I was lucky because there was always some really nice, the system optimizes the carrot spacing. Just as you lose the flavor of a carrot, there's another one dangling out in front of you. And if the system optimized the carrot spacing for you, then just before you give up on something, there will be another carrot out there. If the carrot doesn't appear, another thing I've said to many students is, if you think you're going to be asked to do nothing other than what you already know how to do on a given day, it's probably time to change. So if you're stagnating, then make a change. There's nothing wrong with moving to the next thing. So I'm dodging the question at one level, but I'm giving you an honest answer at another. It depends. Most things worth being passionate about are hard. So accept that. If they are not interesting and just end up being boring, then change. Go do something else. Okay? Good luck.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Garcia. I'm actually from Michigan. I'm not on WBI. I'm from the Chimera 1684. And my question is, how did you feel? How were you when you were our age, like 19 or 20?
Uh, ask feel about Alyssa. How did I feel about what?
Just life in general. Like, how were you in life? Like, were you going through stuff like that?
Let me let me not rephrase it, but give you a direction, Woody. What either made you make the choices you made for where you went, or what choices were kind of, if you go back and follow the spider web, the fine lines that make us get us where we are in life? You know, where was your head at that time? And
My standard, Alyssa, is except for asking Margaret to marry me, I didn't make any decisions for the first 25 years because I was lucky. I was just running down the slot and people were slapping me on the butt saying, keep it up. And I was rewarded for doing that. And whether that was wise or simple-minded, I can't really tell. But there were times when just continuing to do it was complicated. And I felt fired up about a lot of things. When I was, let's see, well, when I was a senior in high school, I was still recovering from broken bones and stuff like that. I was sorting out the anxiety about going to college because I hadn't planned to go to college and I needed to get ready. In my senior year, by the way, I didn't take home a homework book once, except when I was working on a paper on the abominable snowman, which was fun to read about. But my high school was kind of an academic joke. So there was some anxiety about that. I had made this big mistake and lost my girlfriend because my father got a full-size Army half-track in the shop to convert to a machine to haul stuff out of the forest. And before we started cutting it up and making a hauling machine out of it, I showed up at my girlfriend's house in a fully armed half-track to go out on a date on Saturday night. And she didn't think that was cool. And I think it was really, I learned enough about her that she had no sense of adventure that we split soon after that. So my love life was complicated because I had no idea who I wanted to hang around with. And I was anxious a lot. I did the normal things to try to be cool, and I never really knew how to do that. You know, I was not naturally, you know, in high school, for example, in debate class, I took debate because I think I needed to learn to speak some, and the debate instructor told me one time after I had just done an affirmative pitch that I needed to stop making maternity ward sounds. I never understood what that was about, but I decided I needed to learn to publicly speak some, so I spent some time working on it. So I think I was a reasonable mix of anxiety and uncertainty, but maybe arrogant enough to think, you know, I can do this if I get my head around it. And here's another thing that I think turned out to be interesting, important to me. My father was a weird dude. He was a terrible businessman, but he was very creative, and he was known as Old Abe, and I worked with him a lot. But he did unusual things. He invented things. He built weird stuff. He built a slab kicker, which was a fast-spinning, toothed 30-inch drum that was used to launch pieces of wood into a bonfire 100 yards away. Crazy, wild machine. You know, as an engineer, I know you can't do that, but Dad wasn't encumbered by that, and he did it and it worked. So Dad didn't have the kind of peer review things that scientists have, engineers have. So he would go around town telling people, I'm going to take a thingamajig and a widget and put them together and make a doodad. And everybody in town would say, Abe, you crazy son of a bitch, you can't do that. And he would then do it and go parade around town and say, see, I did it. We had, you know, our hunting and fishing vehicle was a 24-foot trailer that was big, tall, heavy thing that had a roof that lifted up to lift cots up and stuff. And it was following the Dodge Power Wagon, and on the top of that was a 35-foot deer stand, because a guy almost shot my father once in the woods, so he decided that he would rather hunt deer from up in a tree. And all that rig was 60 feet long. And we'd have four-wheel change, and we'd have to go in the swamp deeper than anybody else. So there were a whole bunch of things about my father's behavior that seemed to allow me to be a little bit weird. And so building a hot rod roadster and collecting butterflies and being a Boy Scout and dating a cheerleader seemed kind of okay. You know, it was, and I think maybe a mix between being arrogant enough to be myself and insecure enough to work hard was kind of the way I felt. It's a hard question, Alyssa.
Hey, Woody.
Yes.
I'm Jackie. We've met before. I'm an alum from Powers Chargers 894. And my question is, what is your favorite book to read?
Ooh, that's it's a hard question right now because just finished a book that is strongly bidding for my favorite, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman has been my favorite for a long time. And I really do recommend that book. He won the Nobel Prize for teaching economists that humans are irrational. It turns out the newest economics Nobel Prize winner won the Nobel Prize for the same thing. It's really weird. And he's a University of Chicago guy. But the one that Margaret and I read together, and Righteous Minds by Jonathan Haidt. And Haidt is spelled H-I-E-D-T or something like that. But Righteous Mind. And I'm going to, if you come to first events and watch videos and stuff, you'll probably hear me say more about it. But I think you guys need to study your own brain, because social scientists and brain scientists are teaching us some really amazing stuff. And the reason I love those two books, together they're nice, because they teach us that there's a whole bunch of stuff that we're doing all the time that's in our subconscious and we don't even know it. So the only way you can get at that is through metacognition. You have to learn to think about your own thinking. And we don't do that. You know, that I've in past first things talked about, you need to learn about your own brain and you need to learn about learning. Because if you get 7% better at learning, in 10 years you will have learned twice as much as somebody who didn't do that. You can't afford a factor of 2 in what you can learn. So in your careers, in 20 or 30 years, you can have a huge advantage because you learned how to learn. The other thing is learning to think about your own thinking and recognizing that so many things we all do. Jackie, you have things happening in your head just like me right now. You and I are doing this incredible dance. You know, I just gestured like this several times. That came from my subconscious. You just smiled. That came from your subconscious. The whole thing that we're doing now is all this dance that started in the primitive brain. And the primitive brain is just overwhelmingly powerful. And if we don't learn to pay attention to it, we do a lot of stupid stuff and don't recognize where it came from. So I'm excited about what we can learn by reading about how your brain works and how you learn. Good question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick from Metal Muscle Team 1506.
Hi, Nick.
And I know that you're into nature photography. Have you ever ventured into any other types of photography, and why or why not?
Yes, but not as much. My doctoral minor was art, so um, in that context, I did film photography a fair amount, and mixed film photography with painting and silk screening and printmaking and a lot of that stuff. But now digital cameras are just so bloody amazing. It's just stunning what they do. And recently in Madagascar, uh, had a chance to spend a little more time taking people pictures, and I really liked some of the things that I saw when I got back to the big screen and could look and edit and stuff. But nature photography is just stunning to me. I just love learning about animals and stuff. And I made, when I first started doing underwater photography with film cameras, the standard underwater housing was a piece of junk. It's just awful. And back before CNC was around, I spent a lot of time at a milling machine hogging out a aluminum skin to go on the outside of my 35 millimeter camera that was essentially looked like a fat 35 millimeter camera. And I got a lot of grief from people about that. They called me Billet Woody, or I'd hog it out of a block. But so underwater things are just incredible to watch and see. You go out and go to the bottom of the ocean before dawn and just sit there and watch dawn come and watch the polyps go back in and the parrotfish come out of their shell cocoons and the eels come out and feed. That stuff is just wonderful. So, and birds are so beautiful. I've been, in the last few weeks, Margaret and I have been setting up a set of 4 strobes in the backyard. And by using high-speed sync and 4 strobes and shooting it at 8,000th of a second, you can get birds mid-flight and just these wonderful detailed images. They're just really beautiful. So it's not that I dislike other kinds of photography. We just came back from Iceland doing landscape photography. And I think we got some reasonable images, but it's very different. And so what do you shoot? What do you do?
There you go.
I mainly do videos of this kind of thing for my robotics teams.
Hi Woody, I'm Kyle Heastand. I was on Team 862 and I'm currently studying computer science here at Ketter. And my question is what is one thing you've learned throughout your life that has helped you the most?
I've learned that learning allows access to awe, AWE. Not that long ago when the gravity waves were detected, nobody seemed to care. And I felt really good that I was able to learn more about the way they did those measurements and to try to understand gravity waves enough to be in awe. People, I think the more you learn, the better you have a shot at being just astounded by something. I rant a lot about our loss of allegiance to truth and that we humans have access to the laws of the universe that are pretty close to truth. We don't have them perfectly done, but I'm really in awe of the fact that you and I are talking now and you're 2,000 miles away, and this stuff that we're using to communicate is going through our body, and somehow we're able to just pull it out and unscramble it from all this other stuff. And there's a neutron star out there that just, two of them collided and created a new black hole in the last week, and the gravity waves from that are still flying. So knowing enough to appreciate what is known, I think, is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so I think learning to appreciate experience is another way to say it. All right?
Hi, Woody. My name's Caleb Burgess. I am a graduate of Team 5066, this Lane Singularity. And my question for you is, as somebody who mentors FTC and FLL teams, what do you feel is the most important thing as FIRST alumni to give back to the community and to teach the next generation of FIRST?
It's a really profound and good question. And I think for you, the thing you have to really cling to is that you're trying to create an environment in which creative learning flourishes. And you know, my definition of true education is not how much of the cup you've been able to drink, but it has to do with creating a self-image that allows you to know from personal experience that you can do something hard, that you can do something technically complex, that you can do something for others, with others, ethically complex, etc. So if, while you're mentoring, if you keep in mind that what you're trying to do is allow the person you're working on or the group that you're working on to experience something new about themselves and get the kind of feedback that lets them know that, you know, making mistakes not wrong, it's an education. So all those nurturing things. And you have to suppress your desire to take over and be critical and stuff and kind of let it happen. And sometimes it takes a while to blossom, but I think it will. Okay? Do you have any advice to me?
No. Thank you very much.
Maybe. So how many in the room have added a mentor for yourself in the last year? Has anybody picked up a new mentor? Then you should. See, in particular, while you're a student, you can go to people that you like or admire or respect and say, you know, I'd like to have a mentor. Could we have some kind, could I call you every once in a while? Could I send you an email? And as long as you modulate that well, they'll be flattered. But, you know, you can go to the president of Kettering and say, see, I need some mentorship. Try it. Some of my best mentors are former students, and I have a bunch of them, and they're really, really helpful. So another way to learn, Kyle, about how to be a good mentor is to be mentored and notice what you appreciate. Okay?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm Eric Mazza. I'm an alumni of 503 Frog Force from Novi, Michigan. And I got two questions. The first one, I think everyone wants to know, can you tell us anything about First Power Up?
Here's the question. Is a plate on a field?
Define, you mean an electromagnetic field?
No, I'm just trying to make it very simple for you because you can't answer it, so I'm trying to make it so, is a plate on a field?
It's a fun one to answer, you know, and I think trying to do everything in 8-bit is going to be tough because, you know, an 8-bit hammer, you can't hit a 16-bit nail with an 8-bit hammer. It's really going to be challenging. So, you know, I'm looking forward to finding out what you guys do with it.
And then my actual question was, what is your favorite first season and why?
This is going to seem like a dodge, but it's the truth. My favorite one is the most recent one in almost all cases, because I remember it really well. But I think this last season was wonderfully exciting because it was rich in visual and incredibly intense. I tell you, my least favorite was Stack Attack, and I helped design that, and that was just stupid. I mean, we just made a dumb mistake, and I'm embarrassed that we didn't see it coming, because I had written papers on designing creative design exercises, so I should have seen that, and I just didn't. But if the design group disagrees about the right way to do it, then that's a good sign. And from what I know about the one that's being refined right now, it's going to be exciting. And
hello, I'm Noah Agnew.
Don't worry about the camera, just ask questions.
I'm a graduate from Team 1504, the Desperate Penguins, and I was wondering what was the most interesting way you've seen a team bend the rules?
Well, WPI became famous for taking unusual tacks for quite a few years, and some of the ones that they did were quite purposefully weird and strange, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But I don't have a long-term favorite. When you design a game, you really want to make sure that it's versatile enough that there will be surprises, but you don't want any really big surprises. So if a team does something that is completely unexpected, but within the rules, that's usually means you didn't do your homework enough. So I apologize for not having a clean answer, but some of the early one of the ones that was really impressive, by the way, was many years ago when we were moving goals around on the field, and Team 71 built a machine that had file cards on walking beams underneath the robot. And so it reached out and grabbed these, put out these long arms, and then if you looked closely, you saw it just barely moving as these file cards were biting into the carpet and pulling. And they were strong enough that they could tear the carpet. So that was a within the rules rule beater that was quite impressive.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time and doing this. And everything worked out perfectly. We figured all the glitches, which made me happy how many times you were willing to test. And those pictures of the birds you sent me, now I see what they are, because I love the way the wings on that one were flipped up, and just seeing, birds do that without even thinking.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it is amazing and stuff like that. That was really cool. And but anyway, we do want to thank you very much